In 1893, a 12-year-old boy named Hans Wilsdorf lost everything. Orphaned at a young age, he was sent away to a boarding school in Germany. But it was there, away from family, that Hans found something else. His destiny. He made a friend from Switzerland who introduced him to something that would change his life. Watchmaking. By the age of 19, Hans had moved to Switzerland and was working at Kuno Korten, a watch export company. His job? Checking the accuracy of watch movements. That precision, that attention to detail. It stayed with him forever. In 1903, Hans moved to London to learn marketing and sales. And just 2 years later, in 1905, he did the unthinkable. With a loan from his brother-in-law, he founded Wilsdorf and Davis, aiming to create elegant, reliable watches that were accurate to the second. His early pocket watches made waves, but Hans had a vision, one no one believed in at the time. He believed the future wasn't in the pocket. It was on the wrist. In 1908, he trademarked a name that would become immortal. Rolex. Short. Memorable. Easy to pronounce in any language. But the road to building a global watch empire was just beginning. Backhand index pointing right in part 2. The world goes to war. And Rolex has to fight to survive. By 1910, Rolex had achieved what no other wristwatch company had. The first wristwatch movement certified as a chronometer. That meant incredible precision. And it shocked the watchmaking world. Rolex was gaining traction. But then World War I erupted. Suddenly Rolex faced a crisis. Due to Britain's war taxes, export duties shot up by 33%. Hans had to act fast. So in 1919 he moved his entire company to Geneva, Switzerland and renamed it Rolex Watch Company. It was a bold move. While the world fell apart, Hans Wilsdorf built something stronger. He observed that soldiers in the trenches had started wearing wristwatches. Pocket watches were useless in war. So Hans created the Rolex trench watch, water-resistant, luminous and built for battle. By the end of the war, wristwatches weren't just a trend. They were the new normal. And Rolex was leading the charge. But Hans wasn't done. He saw a new enemy to conquer: nature itself. Backhand index pointing right in part 3, Rolex goes underwater and never looks back. The 1920s roared with progress. But Hans Wilsdorf had his sights set deeper. Literally. He realized something no one else had. Water, dust, and air were silently destroying wristwatch accuracy. So in 1926 he introduced a revolution in watchmaking. The Rolex Oyster, the world's first waterproof watch. It featured a screw-down crown, hermetically sealed case, and unmatched durability. But Hans didn't just create innovation. He marketed it like no one else. To prove its power, he strapped a Rolex Oyster to the wrist of swimmer Mercedes Gleitze, who attempted to swim the English Channel. She didn't finish the swim. But the watch. It worked perfectly. Hans placed Rolex watches in fish tanks and jewelry stores. He ran ads with opera singers like Evelyn Lay, elegant, timeless, and bold. Then in 1931 Hans did it again. He solved another problem: constant manual winding. The result? The Rolex Oyster Perpetual, the first self-winding watch with a perpetual rotor. It used the movement of your wrist to power itself. It wasn't just innovation. It was magic on your wrist. Rolex wasn't just a company anymore. It was a phenomenon. Backhand index pointing right. But in part 4, Rolex faces its greatest test and reaches the summit of time itself. The world changed again. World War II shattered nations. But Rolex stood strong. In fact, Hans Wilsdorf even sent replacement watches to captured Allied soldiers, telling them they could pay after the war. It wasn't just marketing. It was legacy building. In 1945, a year after losing his beloved wife, Hans celebrated Rolex's 40th anniversary by launching the Rolex Datest, the first automatic watch with a date display. It even had a tiny magnifying glass, the Cyclops, to make the date easier to read. But Hans wasn't done yet. From 1953 to 1960, Rolex changed the world again. The Rolex Explorer went up Mount Everest with Edmund Hillary. The GMT Master kept pilots synced across time zones. The Deep Sea Special survived the Mariana Trench, 11,000 meters below the ocean. Rolex didn't just tell time anymore. It conquered it. In 1960, Hans Wilsdorf passed away at the age of 79. But his vision didn't die with him. Rolex remains a symbol of precision, resilience, and timeless ambition. A legacy born from the mind of an orphan boy. who believed time could be worn on the wrist.